welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for being here again this week. So again, we are going to do a really quick and easy recipe. As always, we only are using very few ingredients and really very staple ingredients. I think pretty much everyone will have these ingredients on hand, and they are also very inexpensive. I'm very fortunate that I have a garden right now, so I am able to harvest my tomatoes right from the garden. But again, they're very inexpensive at the grocery store. So we're going to be making some classic bruschetta, except it's going to be oil-free and much healthier, and a lentil spread that is going to up the protein in this dish and make you feel a lot more full. So I have about 10 tomatoes, and as you can see, they're different sizes because I have different tomatoes going on in the garden. So this is what I'm doing. I'm just chopping them up. You can do them much more fine if you want to, but they are going to cook down because we are going to be cooking them in the oven at 350 just to cook them down really nicely with the fresh basil from the garden. So it's up to you how fine you want to cut them, but this is what I did. So I just chopped up my 10 tomatoes and I put it in an oven safe dish. This is a dish that I thrifted. I showed you guys in a previous video. I love this dish. It works out perfectly and I'm using it all the time. I love these vintage old school dishes. So I'm just throwing in my tomatoes into the pan, and then I'm going to go harvest some basil outside. So you can use any type of tomato for this. I've used cherry tomatoes. Honestly, whatever I grab from the garden is what I'm going to use, and all the tomatoes work out fine, so don't stress about getting a particular tomato. Any tomato will do in this recipe. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. If you like health and wellness videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss any upcoming videos. You will get notified every time I post a new video. So as far as the basil goes that I'm going to be using, I'm just using regular basil. I do have Thai basil as well, and sometimes I mix the Thai basil. I just find the Thai basil is a little bit stronger, so I really like it in certain dishes, but this time I'm just going to go ahead and use just a regular basil. And I have about, well, I would say at least 1 cup of basil, but probably more here. Use whatever you prefer. Some people like a lot of basil, some people just like a little bit. If you don't have fresh and you can't get it at the grocery store too, don't stress. Just use the dry basil. Not a big deal. You're still going to get all that lovely flavor. But if you have fresh, of course, try to use the fresh. So I'm just cutting it up, and again, I'm not being fussy with it. You can cut it as finely as you want to, but I'm just chopping it down and then throwing it into the tomatoes and giving it a mix. So when I made this dish, I didn't have any fresh garlic, but I do prefer to use fresh garlic, and I'll use at least 2 to 3 cloves, and I'll chop them up finely and add them into this tomato mixture and mix it up. I didn't have any, so I'm not going to stress about it. I just used some garlic powder, and I used onion powder as well, and I put some Himalayan salt into the mix as well. You use whatever you prefer in your mix, but that is what I did. So if you have fresh garlic, I recommend using the fresh garlic. I know some people like to mince some onion as well in their bruschetta. I don't like to do that. I'm not a huge onion fan. I will use the onion powder, but that's as far as I go with the onion usually. So yeah, that's all I'm doing. Very simple seasonings that you have on hand. If you have some black pepper, add some black pepper as well. So I'm not going to give exact measurements for the seasonings because everybody likes a different amount of seasoning. Just go by eye, do whatever you prefer. I just sprinkled what I liked in, and then I gave it a nice good mix. It's going into the oven and it's going to be baking at 350. I would put it in for 20 to 30 minutes. And just let it soften up and let that basil infuse the tomatoes, and it's going to get really, really flavorful. It will get a little bit watery. Don't stress about that. If you let your mixture cool off, you're going to see that it kind of absorbs some of that water or the juices from the tomatoes. But if it really bothers you, and when I am plating it onto my toast and whatnot, I will use a slotted spoon. That way I'm not getting all of the, runny juices into the bread, because it will make it kind of soggy. So just use a slotted spoon, or just try to minimize how much of the tomato juice you are putting on your bread. That way you don't get it all soggy. So as far as bread goes, you can pretty much use whatever you prefer. I just happen to have some pumpernickel on hand. We don't even eat a lot of pumpernickel normally, but we just happen to have some, and I found some that was oil-free and vegan, so that was really exciting for me. So I ended up cutting that up and using the pumpernickel, and it worked really, really well in this recipe. But again, you can use any whole wheat bread. spelt toast, whatever you have on hand will work really well with this recipe. So while the tomatoes are cooking in the oven, I'm going to make my lentils, and here's 1 cup of mixed lentils. There's like green and there's red mixed in there. You can use whatever lentils you have that's accessible to you. I would just try not to use too many of the red lentils because it does get quite mushy, and although this is a spread, I like to have a little bit of texture to my spread. So I do like mixing the red along with the green just because I feel like that mixture is really nice. And then these are just the seasonings that I'm adding in to my lentils. Again, you can add whatever seasonings you prefer, but this is what I'm using. And am I using exact measurements? No, I'm just sprinkling in what I feel is enough. But you can use, again, whatever seasonings you want. I have garlic powder and cumin and paprika, just kind of the staple seasonings that I always use. And I'm using some Himalayan salt. And again, this changes depending on what I have available to me, but this is pretty much what I always put into my lentils. And I'm just doing them old school in a pot on the stove. Yes, I have a pressure cooker and I use that quite often, but because this is a small amount, I'm not going to be using the pressure cooker for that. I'm just going to use a small pot on the stove. So I have the lentils in and the water, and I'm just adding in the seasonings, and then I'll give it a nice mix and get it going. Once it starts boiling, I do reduce the heat. I cover it and I let it do its thing slowly. I'm not going to rush the lentils. I like to slowly cook them. Anyway, the tomatoes are cooking in the oven, so I do have quite a bit of time for this to cook out. So I really like this meal just because I feel like I don't eat a lot of bread very often, but when I do, I am going to choose something like this, like a bruschetta, something that's hearty and delicious and has a lot of veggies in it. So I am going to top this bread with these lovely tomatoes, and I felt like I needed some more substance. So I really like this meal because it makes you feel really full because the lentils are so hearty, so full of fiber and protein. So this is a fantastic meal to have. You can also use this spread on top of baked potatoes. I love to do that. So I will put this on top of the baked potatoes and also put the tomatoes on top of there. So that's another idea of using the same tomatoes, the same lentils, but instead of bread, put it on a nice baked potato. It's a great topping and it's oil-free, and you're going to be, getting in all those extra veggies by adding all the tomatoes. So this is what it looks like when it came out of the oven, and this is how my lentils look once all the water is absorbed. And see, I did, let it cook down quite a bit so that it's very easy to spread. If you wanted to, you could even mash this up further, but honestly, it works perfectly. I just put it right on the bread and it spreads beautifully, just like this. So I'm just toasting my pumpernickel, and this is what it turned out to look like. Again, this was a nice treat having the pumpernickel, something different. So I'm just spreading my lentil mixture on top of the bread, and I'm giving it a generous amount. And then the tomatoes are just going to go right on top. If you wanted to, you can also sprinkle a little bit of nutritional yeast right on top of your tomatoes just for that added flavor and presentation if you are serving it to other people. So this was really, really tasty, and I also brought this to work with me for a work lunch. I just didn't put it on the bread. I just put the bread separately, and that way I could just assemble it at lunch at work. So another idea for a healthy lunch or, picnic meal. You can also put it together just as you are about to eat it. I just wouldn't put it on the bread early because then it will get a little bit soggy. So like I said earlier, I'm using a slotted spoon just so I don't get all of those tomato juices. But if your mixture is sitting out for a while, or you are using it for the next day, you will notice that a lot of the juices get absorbed again, and it won't be so runny. It's just it came right out of the oven, so it is quite juicy right now. So I'm using that slotted spoon. That way I can reduce the amount of juice going on my bread because I don't want it to get all soggy. So this is the easy meal that I prepared today. Super easy. The only time consuming part was it cooking in the oven. And yes, the lentils are cooking slowly on the stove top, but I was busy doing other things. So really this meal came together quite quickly, and I didn't have to fuss about it or be watching over it at the stove. I just kept it at low heat. And this is it. This is my simple meal. I'm just going to eat it outside and enjoy the outdoors because you guys know me. I enjoy the nice weather fully until I can't sit outside anymore and it's freezing. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me for another quick and easy recipe. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming content, and let me know in the comments below what other types of videos you'd like to see. Stay healthy, everyone. Love ya. Thanks for being here.